Hi guys, good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Kindred Baldus and I will be giving you guys my STAR presentation this evening. I believe that all students should be taught with equity, not equality, in a totally inclusive and safe environment. Although for myself, that has not always been the education that I've gotten. In 4th grade, I felt very unwelcome in my classroom. The teacher made it seem like I was a nuisance when I would ask too many questions, or if I felt like I needed to get up and move around, I had a behavior issue. It was never really a loving environment for me. And so it put me down and made me feel like I just was not good enough to be in a classroom. Until in high school, I met Mr. Berger at Blue Valley Academy, who really relit a love for education in me, made me feel welcome. And it was not just in his class. He would check in with me for his other classes for my other classes and make sure that I was doing what I should and make sure that I felt the way that I should. And so through him, I was able to love education again and decide to go into education. I hit a few roadblocks, but my favorite was having my son. I had him when I was 18, and so I had to put off college, but now I'm back because I want to give him the life that he deserves. And I think that through MNU, I can get the education I need to be able to have the career so that I can provide for him. Tonight we'll be going over the 5 pillars of teacher education, the ways that I've seen it exemplified in my practica, the way that I have implemented it, and the ways that I hope to implement them in the future. Pillar 1 is for me to demonstrate my competence in oral and written communication with my students, my parents, and my colleagues. I would like to start out by passing out a sample of what I will give out the first day of my student teaching, just to get to present myself to the parents, talk about my education, my experiences, and what I hope to get out of the year with their children. Another way that I will communicate with my parents is through the website that we developed in TNL Tech 1. And it gives them other ways to contact me. It'll talk about the units that we're going through and other things that are going on in the classroom. Seesaw is one of my favorites. They use it in Blue Valley, so I utilize it to see what my son is doing. If I'm in a different district, I will obviously use the platform that they choose, but I really think that that's a good way to communicate more at the time and at the moment because it's more accessible through the phone and through iPads. For communication with students, I currently am a long-term sub at J.C. Harmon High, and at the beginning of the semester, this is a sample of the document that I gave them to get to know them while I was talking about myself so that they could get to know me. It also gave me avenues to be able to communicate with them through their email and with their parents so that I had their parents' phone numbers. I also utilize Google Classroom at Harmon, where I can input materials, assignments, quizzes, notifications, whatever I need if my student's absent, or if they just miss something or misplace it, they can reprint it. Student reflection, I think, is a good way for them to communicate with me how they feel. In my practicum at Emerson, this is what they use. It's a 1 through 4 chart where at the end of a lesson, she can just prompt them and say, how do you feel? And they know by her saying that they hold up a 1 through 4 on their fingers, whether they're saying, I don't understand it, or I can do this all by myself. It gives her a quick gauge on how her lesson went, and then it also teaches them self-reflection. At MNU, I was taught this way of self-reflections on the template through higher order of thinking, engaged listening, authentic connections, and our technology use. So we look back at our lessons and think, what went right, what went wrong, what can I do next time to increase anything that I'm wanting out of that lesson. Lastly is communication with colleagues. I believe that we should always have open lines with our colleagues of communication, and I think that starts with first impressions. We can either have a great face-to-face connection, or I can share with my colleagues my portfolio that I've developed here, which will have resources that I've gathered or anything that I've developed through my education, and I'll continue to add to it once I start my career. But I think this is a good way to open up with whether I get a new principal or maybe I get a new colleague on my grade level. It's a good way to communicate who I am and what I do. Collaboration with grade level teachers, as I already stated, is really important to me. I think as first year teachers and as teachers in general, it's good to get feedback, it's good to be on the same page as other teachers. Anything to do with getting feedback back is important to me. Pillar 2 is for me to demonstrate research-based strategies to develop and deliver effective curriculum, instruction, and assessment. In classroom management, I learned that my style is authoritative, and I do agree with that through my experiences as a para, substitute experiences, and my practica. Authoritative teachers believe in strong quality relationships with their students while setting clear boundaries, and I think the most important is the why, giving them a reason why you're setting those boundaries. It develops a good sense of community in the classroom, like they're a part of it and they understand that it's for them, not to harm them. Supporting theorists that I feel like connect with my classroom management and my education philosophy are John Dewey and Albert Bandura, who both believe teachers are facilitators rather than leaders. I'm here to guide my students and get them to where they need to be with what they need to be rather than hand-holding them step by step so they're not getting the education they deserve. As I stated previously, my education philosophy is about teaching with equity over equality. As you can see in the photo, equity is giving the students what they need to succeed rather than giving what equality is and everyone gets the same thing. Your students may start out on different levels and different stages, and giving them all the same thing is not fair to them or to their education in the long run. Pillar 3 is for me to demonstrate my commitment to serve and to lead. Some of my most recent service projects have been last October at Brick House, which is my boyfriend's restaurant. We partnered with Hope House, which is a shelter for women that are escaping domestic violence situations. Most of them have children. So we were able to raise $3,000 through our raffles, our silent auction, t-shirt sales, and a percentage of the sales from the food and drinks that night, along with toiletry items, clothes for the women and children, and then we got to actually donate a lot of toys so that they had Christmas presents to open at the shelter. I did link the interview that my boyfriend did to explain why it's so close to our heart. If you guys are interested in getting involved with something like this, you can obviously click it later. We will be doing an annual one, so it's coming up again in October. The next service that I would like to talk about is at J.C. Harmon. We have a closet. With 91% of our students being at an economic disadvantage, we like to come together and give them the opportunity to get things that their parents may not be able to provide for them. So I worked with a colleague here at MNU, and we were able to donate clothes so that they were able to update the closet, and so kids coming in, maybe they don't have winter jackets or it's too cold and they're still in shorts. We are able to provide them with that. I would love to carry this on throughout my education career, whether me as a class or me and my class donate to a school that needs it or I bring it to a school that needs it. On to student advocacy. Starting out in special education as a para, I was surrounded with educators constantly advocating for their students and their students' needs. So it's always been very close to me. Through the knowledge that I gained in human development and Survey of the Exceptional Child, I was able to recognize the milestones for speech that my best friend's daughter missed. At 2 years old, she was not even saying mom. And so you can see here, it says combine 2 words to communicate by 2. So with this knowledge that I was given, I was able to turn over my resources and my knowledge and my tools to her mom and to encourage her to get her the services that she needed. So she's now 3.5 years old and she's at Blue Valley Early Childhood getting speech language therapy. So that was really exciting to see her. She's now progressing and being able to talk. Pillar 4 is for me to demonstrate my understanding of diverse student groups. I already showed you another sample of my Harmon About Me, but at the high school level, I think it is very important to acknowledge that there is an LGBTQ community. And so I've placed a my preferred pronoun on here for them so that if they do not adhere to the gender roles that they were assigned, or if they're in their transitioning stage, they're able to communicate that with me and feel comfortable and consider me an ally. I also have translated the letter home into Spanish. If I do end up working in a school with families that speak other languages in home, I would like to acknowledge that by sending home letters in their native language. I think that develops a good line of communication with parents and then makes them feel comfortable and acknowledged. Lastly is my multicultural section of a library that I would want. My practica teacher at Emerson, this is her library, and she was very kind and let me take pictures so that I could utilize it for this PowerPoint. I would want a multicultural section in my library so that my students understand that other people are different. Maybe they see different people in the classroom, but they understand in the world, there's so many cultures, it's not just what they see. Same But Different is a book that I want to incorporate into my classroom. I would incorporate it into my classroom if I was in first grade, which is one of my favorite grades. I would use reading literature 1.7 and 1.9, which talk about the characteristics of the characters, comparing and contrasting the characters through their experiences and the text detail. These two students are pen pals on opposite sides of the world, and so I would develop some activities such as orally comparing and contrasting the differences in the two characters. Or we could have a writing center where they choose a character and compare and contrast their life with the character. Pillar 5 is for me to demonstrate that I'm an effective teacher by meeting the appropriate content standards. I'm going to pass out. This was my K2 literacy observed lesson. I chose science and then I integrated literacy into it. The lesson planning process here has been really clear to me and I've loved it. In tech, we used bubble.us and we created a concept map. So I started with the concept of habitats and I could choose standards based on the grade that I was in for that concept. And then you can't see it, but there's math, and then history over here, but I chose to go with literacy, and then I expanded my concepts on that with the other standards. So once we develop our concept, we're then able to start looking at the standards, like I showed you, and develop what we want our lesson plan to look like. We start setting lesson plan goals. So we want to know what our students will understand after the lesson. We have critical content and critical skill. What can they know, or what will they know and what will they do? The essential questions that we want them to be able to answer at the end of the lesson. Then we go into objectives, and we have to specify how we're going to assess those objectives and make sure that our students are meeting those. We follow up with integration of literacy, key vocabulary, language objectives, and then we go into technology, which is CMR right here, substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. How am I changing my lesson to adhere to the more technology used in my classroom, which also can be used with the 4 C's, which are the 21st century skills. Here's my symbol. So if I got to this point and I decided, okay, I want to be more creative and I want to substitute maybe students making a paper book. I could use Shadow Puppet. This is where they can videotape themselves or they can record themselves telling a story and then they turn it into a book on the iPad. So I would be substituting the art supplies with that app. Then we go on to differentiation. How am I making sure that all of my students, oh gosh, sorry. How am I making sure that I'm reaching all of my students? What am I doing differently for my students that need a little extra time or are going at a faster pace? How am I differentiating my lesson? Then we go into instruction, which I really like MNU's idea that we specifically do word for word, what are we gonna say? And then it shows how are we modeling while we're saying it? How am I assessing if they understand my modeling and my instruction? Then we go into guided practice, independent practice, and closure. We gotta wrap it all up and bring it all in. And then we have self-reflection, like I already talked about, which I, in my lesson, talked about what went wrong, how I should change it, and what I should do next time. I want to leave you guys with this quote: the kids who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways. I really relate to this in KCK, and it's just reminded me that no matter if students are behaving or not behaving, all students should be loved.
Can I just ask where you got that quote?
Gosh, it was I was on Pinterest looking at quotes. It didn't have
a source.
It didn't have a source. And so hopefully now I get to go on to student teaching. Here are my resources. Are there any questions?
Yeah,